The other thing we wanted to talk about, and we were talking about this, we were having a mean debate about this earlier today.
Here we go.
What makes you worthy? What makes one worthy to lift Mjolnir in the MCU? Now, you and I, we were having this conversation about, of course, I'm going to come with my expertise about the comics. I'm going to talk about worthiness there. And you're saying, or at least, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
You good.
That worthiness in the MCU is different than it is in the comics. So I just want to let's have it out. Let's see. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, look, all I'm saying is, especially in the comics, because the comics are always ahead of all of the stuff that the mainstream audiences get, right? So the mainstream, I mean, think about just the idea, the concept of multiverse. It's 23 movies in, and we're just now talking about, man, we've been talking about the multiverse in comics since the 90s almost? Like with the Crisis and longer, right? Like
the 60s or 70s, they've been doing multiverse.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like, there are so many things that happen in the comics that the MCU is extremely hand-holding audiences. So when it comes to Mjolnir and like things like, the hammer has its own sentience, or, the hammer chooses and stuff, like, it ain't that deep. It ain't that deep in the MCU. The MCU is more like, Odin put a curse on the hammer, and whatever, Odin believed, because he was the curse bearer or whatever, whatever he believed. Yeah, he enchanted it. So it's kind of like, that's the only way, because the enchantment itself is not descriptive. The enchantment doesn't say anything like, if you do the right thing, that you can lift the hammer. No, it says whoever is worthy, they are worthy of the power of Thor, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what does that mean? Well, the only way you can know what that means is to look at Odin and be like, well, Odin, what do you think is worthy, since you're the one that's putting this subjective definition on the spell? And for me, I was looking at the MCU and just kind of looking at, all the people that have been unworthy, and the people that have been worthy, and looking at Odin himself. And the most consistent thing I can find was that timeout. I don't know if I want to get this, because this is literally going to be the main thing for my video.
Come on.
I'm just saying, like,
okay, so
because it's kind of like when I was doing the WandaVision stuff.
Fine. How about this? Let me go first, right?
Okay.
And so this way you can choose what you want to counter.
Okay.
All right. So my thing about worthiness is this, right? Magic in the MCU and DC and comics in general is always a very tricky thing. One thing is that sometimes the person who creates the enchantment doesn't know the exact outcome, or is surprised by the outcome of their enchantment. They meant to do one thing and something else happened, right? So sometimes they're very careful about how they use their enchantments and how they word themselves. My theory is that worthiness isn't something that Odin was consciously trying to do the way it happened. He himself had trouble lifting Mjolnir because of his enchantment, and he can't break it.
You're talking about in the comics?
In the comics, yeah. He found himself multiple times unable to lift Mjolnir because of its enchantment, and he would try to use his magic to override the original enchantment and failed to do it. One thing that's been defined in the comics is what makes someone worthy. Now, this is true. It's been ambiguous for a long time. This isn't like, worthy was just like, what? You got to be a good
It was just
person.
like a big catch-all type of phrase.
And you would think like certain people would be worthy enough to lift Mjolnir because of their character. Peter Parker tried to lift it, can't do it, right? Cyclops tried to do it, couldn't do it, right? A few people have tried to come and lift Mjolnir under the right circumstances and failed. Few people could. Beta Ray Bill could. Steve Rogers could. And what we learned was worthiness was defined.
Superman could.
Superman could. I believe Storm could as well. Storm from the X-Men.
I think she did. Yeah.
And what we've learned is that, also by a common trait, is that what makes someone worthy is their level of selflessness and a willingness to self-sacrifice in order to save others or save or protect someone or something. And depending on their willingness to self-sacrifice is what defines their worthiness. Now, Odin has fluctuated back and forth multiple times on his willingness to self-sacrifice. Sometimes he's with it, sometimes he's not. Right? And that's really impacted him. And that's what really makes it me feel like in the MCU, worthiness for Steve Rogers has always been consistent. He's always been showing that trait. This is a stories trait that they've planted. And this is something the Russos are really good at. They're good at continuing threads and continuing ideas, even if they're introduced by other directors. They planted that seed with Joe Russo in Captain America, the First Avenger, that Steve Rogers was willing to self-sacrifice by doing that grenade dive. And he kept up that theme throughout the series, throughout the movies. Joss Whedon picked up on it. He carried it. And then when the Russos got it, they carried it too. I feel like that this is what makes it so that Steve Rogers was always worthy in the MCU. And he really was trying to not embarrass Thor. That's also more credit to his willingness to self-sacrifice.
Whack.
For the greater, for others.
I hate that.
That's more. That's stupid. Another. I hear you, stupid. But I'm just saying, this is beginning, middle, end.
Whack. I mean, look, you already know I hate that whole he didn't want to embarrass, Thor excuse. That's so stupid.
Thor got embarrassed as soon as he saw that thing budge.
He didn't. He was shocked. He wasn't embarrassed.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he's like, he'll never be able to lift it.
That's shock. That's not embarrassed.
He's not like taking bets that nobody could lift my hammer.
So?
And then when somebody budged it, he was embarrassed. Yeah, he was.
Man, whatever. It was cheap. It was cheap. They should have let that man be unworthy because he broke up the Avengers and allowed Thanos to take over and kill everyone for 5 years. That is Steve Rogers' fault.
Steve Rogers,
he's a terrible person.
By Thanos, he was a
terrible person.
Picked up Mjolnir and was about to go out the door.
Yeah, after he told the truth. Army. After he told the truth,
was always like that.
When he finally came clean,
that man
then
was
he was like, "Oh, okay, you bet."
He was like, "Listen, for the greater good, bro. We need the Avengers for the greater good, bro."
A little too late.
All right. Well, you don't have to give your theory. You can keep your theory. You can save it. But
no, I think you're right. No, I'm okay with that. My only sticking point is just it's more of the Steve Rogers thing, because I do think he was unworthy temporarily. And I think people need to be okay with that. Like, people get almost offended, like he has to be the Superman, as if even Superman never had moments of doubt or moments of being flawed. I mean, that's one of the reasons, well, besides him being overpowered in the golden age, but one of the problems with Superman was the fact that he was too boring because he was too one-dimensional. And I'm sitting here thinking, like,
because he was too powerful.
That too. I mean, I'm saying both, right? Like, he could do literally anything.
I'll
sneeze a galaxy out the way, or a planet. But also he was just boring. Like, there was nothing meaty about him. There was no room for growth because he never went anywhere. He was never in doubt. There was nothing wrong with the dude. He was a little too perfect. That's why when Tony Stark was like, "Man, I want to punch his perfect teeth," I was like, "Go, Tony, go!" Because he needs that little moment for us to be like, "Yo, I could root for this dude because he's doing something that he feels is right." But sometimes that, the means don't always justify the ends. And that's also okay too, right? Like, that's that's a moment, that's an opportunity for people to sit here, grow, and be better. And that was lacking. So that whole embarrassing thing, I'm missing that.
This is where they come with that expression, straight capping, right? You just reaching, you projected, how you want Cap to feel or Cap to be. This is not the character they wrote. You just want it to be something different. He has his flaws. His flaws are there, but they don't make him unworthy. Unworthy doesn't mean you're a bad person. Unworthy doesn't mean you don't lie to people. Unworthy doesn't mean you don't lie to your friend and keep his family's killers a secret. It means you're willing to self-sacrifice. Thor does all these things on a regular. He lies.
He wasn't willing to self-sacrifice. He wasn't.
Not
because
always,
if he was willing to self-sacrifice, let's just go with your theory. Let's just go with what you said. If he was willing to self-sacrifice, he should have been like, yo, Tony, my boy did something bogus. Don't blame him. Blame me. It was on me, Tony.
I mean, Thor was willing to self-sacrifice. Anyway.
Yeah, he was. I'm talking about Cap. I'm still on Cap. I'm talking about Cap. Cap was not about that.
I'm not justifying why he didn't own up to Tony. I'm just saying he still would have died for Tony. And he said even after he whooped Tony's ass, yeah, call me if you need me, bitch. He left him with his phone. Yo, he's like, yo, I'll still die for you.
Hey, I said the moment he confessed in Civil War, he became worthy again.
Yo, he was.
It was just them 2 years he wasn't worthy. He wasn't worthy.
I want to see your theory, and we're gonna see what the people think.
It's fine. I got a whole video on why Cap's unworthy. Go ahead.
All right. What's the correct opinion? That's
let the people talk.
Let the people talk.